Good evening and welcome to Africa Lenezi. The Battle of Ayn Jalut from 1240 to 1260. The Mongols versus Mamluks. Mamluk in Arabic is said to mean property, which is the Arabic designation for a slave. And to get to the granularity of its meaning a wee bit, it is simply a non-Muslim slave soldier as well as a Muslim ruler of slave origin. Let's not prevaricate. A slave is a slave, regardless of his or her rank. But according to Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla, Mamluks were allowed to carry weapons and perform specific duties, just as you would in a garrison or within the special branch in law enforcement today. Africa, in this case Egypt, for over millenniums was the envy of the world because it was economically sound, politically structured, and articulate in debating and providing solutions to the kingdom's challenges, and its military might, just don't go there, was solid and tight for millenniums, which has been a template for today's Western world to follow, and not to mention its mineral resources, especially its access of gold and its skills in melting iron, engineering, dam construction, its farming industry, and its beautiful black-owned Nubian women and its majestic striking black men was sufficient to make anyone's jaw drop in disbelief. Putting aside history, to top it all, Egypt was the gateway to the African continent due to the location of where the River Nile empties its estuaries into the Mediterranean Sea, making it the natural gateway to Africa. Visitors from far afield were always in awe when their wandering eyes snapped shots of the beauty of the city of Cairo, the rich fertile land, as they sail on the Nile River, rowing past engineering edifices that stand majestically along the oars of the river. The city of Luxor, along the banks of the River Nile, is one of many iconic African cities designed with great architectural skill, unity, and good vision. All you will have to do is to walk through some of the European cities today, and you will see Egyptian monuments appropriated from the city of Luxor, used as majestic masterpieces to enhance the beauty of these European cities. Mother Africa always says to us, success is a result of toil and sweat, and to become successful comes with its own wahala, which is referred to in today's era as challenges. People from far afield or from within our own circle would want to take your success from you. Why? And in today's era, one's success can be dragged from you. The technique of dragging success from you is at times referred to as venture capitalist. Getting back on course, the pharaohs, dynasties, and sultanates had to constantly be on guard or go to war to defend the kingdom from the Kushites from the south, the Berbers from the west, the Persians and Arabians from the east, their immediate northern neighbors such as the Syrians, and of course the notorious Crusaders from the northwest and northeast, the Europeans. Meanwhile, far away deep in the east, the Mongol Empire, founded by Genghis Khan, also had intentions to invade, occupy, and usurp Egypt, even though Mongolia and Egypt were allies with agreed trade treaties. Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla hinted it believed Genghis Khan may have visited Cairo, and his narration of the beauty of the city to his family back home concurrently precipitated envy and admiration. The Mongol Empire, now called Mongolia, was referred to by the Chinese Song and Jin dynasties as the barbarian wilderness, where the warriors constantly interrupted the flow of trade by brute force ransom demands, now referred to as taxes, on items such as silk, tea, pottery from China in exchange for linen, gold, papyrus, and many more from Egypt via the Silk Road. This was clearly one of the best ways to generate revenue for a kingdom. The Mali Empire's capital city, Timbuktu, under the Emperor Kanka Musa II, gained its wealth via taxes on items such as gold and salt, but it was done under the guise of the law. The Mongols' thirst for world conquest constantly raided China as well. Genghis Khan and his warriors invaded and occupied northern China from 1211 to 1214, bringing about carnage, chaos, hunger, and causing food shortages, bringing about severe human suffering. To make matters worse, the city of Zhongju, now called Beijing, was besieged by the Mongols, thus humiliating the Kaiser of Beijing and his citizens, coercing the city to relinquish its silk, gold, silver, horses, pottery, etc. Ha 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 ha. Such acts caused a domino effect. The news got to Egypt, and Egypt, without a blink of an eye or an ohimlekia, started to plan ahead for such eventualities, because the Mongols' invasion of Beijing not only affected trade between Egypt and China, it was a wake-up call that the same could happen to Egypt. The experience meted on the Jin dynasty precipitated the acceleration of the construction of the Great Chinese Wall, which has become one of the many iconic landmarks of China today. Mongolia on the Silk Route was one of the port of calls which connected these two great superpowers, Egypt and China, at that time. If only this mutual respect experienced millenniums ago could be replicated today. Thus, the constant demand for levies on goods being exported through the Mongolian territory is fair and just if done honestly and with intent to improve relations for the betterment of the region. This also explains why imported items such as silk into Egypt were exceptionally dear and only affordable to the pharaohs, dynasties, kings, and queens throughout Africa and the rest of the world. This technique of levy on items from abroad is now called import duty today. Although officials today executing import duty charges might like to give the impression their modus operandi is different as compared to previous warlords, truth be told, the manner in which import duties is meted out today is no different from the Mongol Empire's era. The main difference today is that it has been enacted into law, legitimizing the act. Silk, among many other items, have been imported from China to Egypt and the rest of Africa for over 3,000 years. Evidence of this can be recalled on one of our journeys to modern-day Ghana in the story of Kente for a King, where two Ewe brothers from the now Volta region in Ghana, Ameyao and Korugu, who resided in Bomre, wove a kente cloth made of silk thousands of years ago for the king of Asante in Kumasi. Staying on course, according to Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla, the Mongols, namely Genghis Khan's descendants, had become bold and were determined to increase their presence to the world, and Egypt and Africa were no exception. The Mongol warlords were determined to leave a big footprint on the African continent. The conquering of Egypt would mean the rest of Africa was there for the taking. Who could blame them? After all, they had conquered all the countries along the Silk Road, from Mongolia all the way to modern-day Syria. The Mongol warriors, according to Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla, underestimated Africans, namely the Mamluks from Egypt, just as well because the Kushites, now modern-day Sudan, and the mighty Ethiopians would have been ready for them. Inland. The Mongols would have been introduced to a different type of warfare. They would have been tossed into the air like flies, if not by the people. The honeybees, followed by the mosquitoes of the continent, would have dealt with them. In the year 1240, Egypt was rightfully concerned and felt the heat of the constant invasion attempts by the Mongol warriors to its next-door neighbors up north, even though the invasion attempts failed. But it is said in the year 1260, the Mongols briefly succeeded in capturing Aleppo and Damascus, where it is said the Ayyubid Dynasty capitulated. Egypt went on code red, and the Africans were not having it. The Africans, or the Egyptians now referred to as the Mamluks, impressively drove out the Mongol warriors within a few months of their invasion in the northern territories, bordering their northern neighbors. This humiliating defeat of the Mongol warriors cut the Mongols to the core. It was an experience they were never used to. The Mongol warriors, after licking their wounds of defeat, invaded Syria again in 1271, 11 years later, where this time 10,000 troops were deployed southwards to capture Aleppo again. The Mongol warlords' intention was to invade and capture Egypt by meandering their way to Egypt through Palestine. However, Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla, breathing a sigh of relief, said the Mamluks, under the command of their leader called Babas, without hesitation drove the Mongol warriors out of the region, all the way beyond the Euphrates River in modern-day Baghdad. Babas' actual name was al-Malik al-Sahir Rukn al-Din Babas al-Bundukari. Babas was one of the commanders of the Egyptian forces who defeated the Seventh Crusade of King Louis IX of France from 1245 to 1248, who attempted unsuccessfully to invade Egypt. The Africans gave him and his troops a good hiding. The Mongol warriors were relentless. There were continuous sporadic wars between the two nations, right up to when the Mongol warriors defeated the Mamluks in 1299. Oh, in the battle of al-Khazandar, until the Mamluks gained or won the battle of Marj al-Saffar in 1303. It is registered that in 1323 the two sides finally signed a peace treaty. Meanwhile, in 1401, the Mongols' threat reared its ugly head again via a warlord called Timurlen, who invaded Aleppo and Damascus with a large army. Timurlen and his army were resisted by the Mamluks once again, but it seems the Mamluks retreated back to Egypt. Could the Mamluks have heard something we did not? It appeared the tides of war took a different direction, heading back to the east. Timurlen died on 18 February 1405, and that was the last time Egypt experienced any more invasion attempts from the Mongol warriors. Mother Africa was quick to chime in. "You see," she said, "this is indicative proof. For millenniums, invaders, crusaders, you name it, have always wanted to take Africa from its people. They have resorted to all sorts of horrific tactics, but Africa still manages to keep above water because the African loves Africa and knows the continent's worth and wants Africa as a whole to wake up and start getting its affairs back in order. It has been dormant for far too long." It is surmised today that parts of the African continent's people survive on $1 a day. Look at that. Who in the so-called developed nation today can live on $1 a day? Ce n'est pas possible. Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla reacted by saying this: "When you have a single arrow, chances are an individual, or at least minimum 2 people, can snap it in 2 quite easily. But when you have a collection of arrows binded together, let's say 5 dozen arrows or 54 arrows binded together, an individual or 2 persons can never snap or break the binded arrows in one go." Unsurprisingly, if an individual or a pair of individuals endeavored to snap the 54 arrows binded together in one go, chances are their wrists will be the object that would snap right off their arm. Thus, Mother Africa says, it's time for the African continent to rise up and work together and realize as a whole, or as a union, Africa would be able to resist invaders much more efficiently and effectively. But as individuals or individual nations, it will be difficult, even near impossible. Mother Africa continued and says, "Africa is all we've got. Africa is all we've got, whether you are for or against it. It is debilitating to at times meet Africans who unapologetically denounce their roots. Mother Africa feels those lost sheep might be suffering from a defect of the mind." Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla finally dropped the bombshell. If Africa does not amend its ways now and place Mother Africa in her rightful place, she will undoubtedly continue to shed helpless tears, which would indubitably impact the next generation, possibly for another 500 plus more years. it is worth mentioning Uncle Kojo Mensah and Papa Kobla said, the Mamluks were a combination of Africans from the continent, not just from Egypt, and they banded together to drive out the Mongol warriors, giving Egypt and the rest of Africa some time to catch its breath before the next invasion. Truth be told, without Africa and the African continent's natural resources, the Western world would not be where it is today. Currently, the city of Cairo, Egypt, is the only African country with an embassy of Mongolia. This brings me to the end of the Battle of Ayn Jalut. Thank you for watching. Until next time, bye.